When you first load up Assassin's Creed Unity for the first time, you're greeted by something that looking back now might represent one of the biggest missed opportunities in the entire franchise. And the strange thing is that most of us probably looked at it, went through it, and tried clicking every tile and thought, why can't we access this? It's because Ubisoft were like teasing us with, you can play this is coming, but it was never going to be coming. And that's the Helix menu. At a first glance, it basically is Abstergo's catalogue of genetic memories, and immediately you'll recognise some of them. Altair, Ezio, Connor, Edward Kenway, Haytham Kenway, Aveline, and even Xiao Jun, which is kind of crazy because Xiao Jun, the game didn't even come out. Unity came out before AC Chronicles. So these are Abstergo's commercialised versions of history. AC4 becomes the Devils of the Caribbean, Ezio becomes Fear and Loathing in Florence, Altair becomes Murder in Levant, and it's basically Abstergo taking real genetic memories and packaging them as entertainment. But then you keep scrolling and things get interesting, because suddenly you find memories that you've actually never played. The Bladed Cross, Jazz Junkies, and Hibernia. Ubisoft has spent nearly 20 years building one of the biggest historical universes in gaming, and some of the most interesting Assassin's Creed games imaginable already exist within the universe, but they just haven't made them. So today I want to look at these 3 forgotten Helix memories and what we actually know about them, what kind of Assassin's Creed games they could become, and ask one question. Could they ever revisit the Helix menu and turn these forgotten concepts into full AAA Assassin's Creed games? So what actually happened to the Helix menu? Because it seems that Ubisoft kind of just left it on a shelf and ditched it. Ubisoft introduced the interface in Unity, filled with all different historical memories, and never really developed them to the full potential. Now, over a decade later, we have something called the Animus Hub. Now, they're very different, they're not the same thing, but the idea feels very similar. Central interface connecting different Assassin's Creed experiences and historical periods, except there's one massive difference. The Animus Hub shows us the games we already have, well, in the RPG series. Everything from Origins all the way forward to right now with Black Flag Resynced. Now, the Helix menu showed us something arguably much more exciting, games we didn't have, and also the Templars version of those games, hence why they're all named different things. Now you could look at the image of Jazz's Junkies and immediately wonder, who's that assassin? What happened to him? What would the game even look like? It made the AC universe feel enormous and almost infinite. Like there were hundreds of memories sitting there waiting to be discovered. And interestingly enough, one of those mysterious memories actually did become something playable. The Emperor's Shadow. On the Helix menu, you'll find something called the Emperor's Shadow, and the assassin displayed here is someone we know very well, Xiao Jun. But Assassin's Creed Unity, as I said before, was released in 2014, and Chronicles didn't release until 2015. Meaning Xiao Jun was already sitting inside the Helix catalogue months before players actually got to play a game. Now, the Emperor's Shadow and Chronicles China aren't exactly the same product, but the important point is that Ubisoft already had Xiao Jun represented as one of these Helix experiences, and she later became a playable character in their own AC title. So why couldn't Ubisoft revisit the others? Because the first one might be one of the most fascinating AC settings they've never properly explored, and that's the Bladed Cross. This memory takes place in 330 AD, and it's during the reign of Roman Emperor Constantine I. According to AC lore, unidentified Roman assassin was active during this period, with the Helix experience surrounding the transformation of the Roman world and the rise of Constantinople. Immediately, there's an Assassin's Creed game here, but there's also much deeper connections to a game we've already played in AC Origins. At the end of Origins, you'll remember that Bayek and Aya established the Hidden Ones. Bayek continues work in Egypt, and Aya becomes Amunet, and eventually helps establish the Hidden Ones in Rome. Now jump forward almost 400 years. What became of that brotherhood? That is where the Bladed Cross could become incredibly interesting. Instead of making another direct origin sequel with Bayek Aya, it could show us their legacy. We play as this unidentified assassin centuries later. The organisation that Bayek and Amunet created has survived, but it's changed. Traditions, enemies, they've evolved. And the Roman Empire itself is transformed around it. Constantine is consolidating power, Christianity is becoming increasingly influential, and Constantinople is emerging as a new centre of the Roman world. You could essentially create a missing link between the hidden ones of Origins and the more recognisable assassin brotherhood we eventually see centuries later. This is what makes the Blade Across so interesting to me. It wouldn't just be Assassin's Creed in Rome again, it could show us how the Brotherhood itself evolved, and that's exactly the kind of historical storytelling AC should be doing. Now let's move on to the next one, Jazz Age Junkies. This might be the strangest concept on the entire Helix menu, but also one of the most talked about. Because we know very little about these assassins, what we do know is they are connected to the Jazz Age and reference historical figures including Ernest Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald, and Gertrude Stein, which immediately raises an interesting possibility. Could AC work in the 20th century? I think it absolutely could, because in the 1920s, it gives you almost everything AC needs. Rapidly expanding cities, political corruption, organised crime, prohibition, massive concentrations of wealth and power, and the world being completely transformed by technology. But that technology would also force the assassin fantasy to change. You're entering an era where firearms are everywhere. You can't realistically walk into a building, fight 20 guards with a sword and casually walk back out. So stealth becomes more important. Social stealth becomes more important. Planning becomes more important. Imagine infiltrating a high society event disguised as a guest. A bit like 007 First Light. They smashed that in that game, and AC and Ubisoft could take inspiration from that. Moving through crowded jazz clubs, climbing fire escapes, following targets through crowded cities. You could almost combine the social stealth of classic AC, the dense environment of Unity, and the more modern atmosphere we see in Syndicate. And underneath all of that is a really interesting story question. What happens to the Brotherhood when the world starts becoming more modern? Technology improving, governments becoming more capable of surveillance, weapons becoming more deadlier and dangerous. The old methods of how the assassins used to work have evolved. That can make Jazz Age Junkies completely different from anything else in the franchise without losing what makes Assassin's Creed Assassin's Creed. Now let's talk about the last one. Now this game would be set during the Irish War of Independence, and immediately that period has almost everything you need for an AC story. Resistance, occupation, political espionage, intelligence networks, guerrilla warfare, informants, secret organisations, and most importantly a conflict where morality isn't necessarily black and white, with Dublin being the centre of the game. Crowded streets, pubs, government buildings, railways, back alleys, safe houses hidden throughout the city. But then outside Dublin the game completely changes. Rural villages, farmland, mountains, forests, small community where everyone knows everyone. Instead of clearing enormous enemy camps like an RPG, missions could revolve around intelligence, following targets, intercepting messages, sabotaging operations, discovering informants, planning assassinations, and then disappearing before reinforcements arrive. Because this is the 20th century, getting detected should be dangerous. If 10 armed soldiers know exactly where you are, you shouldn't be able to parry them all and win. You should probably have to run, and that could actually make AC feel more like an assassin game again. Imagine assassinating a high-ranking target in Dublin. Suddenly, the entire district goes into lockdown. Checkpoints appear, soldiers become searching streets, you have to change appearances, move across rooftops, disappear into a pub, or reach an assassin safe house without being identified. This game could bring all the mechanics that AC have actually displayed in the past together into one game. Now, I'm not saying all of them, but a fair few of them. I mean, the change in your appearance is AC Liberation. Moving across rooftops is pretty much every Assassin's Creed. and disappearing into a pub or reaching an assassin safe house without being identified is AC1, AC Mirage. Now, this game could take the foundations of Unity, social stealth, dense environments, parkour, black box missions, and adapt them to a much more modern historical period. This could be the perfect experiment. Now, Ubisoft have the ideas, and it's what makes the Helix menu so fascinating to look at a decade later, because these aren't settings that fans just randomly came up with. Ubisoft created them. 3 different assassins, 3 different periods of history, 3 different directions in which the franchise could be taken in. One could explore the legacy of the Hidden Ones and the evolution of the Brotherhood. Another could push the Creed into a rapidly modernising 20th century world. And the other one could create a darker game built around espionage, guerrilla warfare, and political instability. And Ubisoft showed us all 3 on a menu in 2014. Which is why I think the Animus Hub has an opportunity here. Don't just use it as a catalogue of AC games we've already played. Bring back some of the mystery. Show us corrupted memories, unknown assassins, historical periods we haven't visited. Let people speculate about what comes next. Because the Helix menu made Assassin's Creed feel like its possibilities were almost endless. Behind every icon could be another assassin, another civilization, another chapter in the secret war stretching across thousands of years. And maybe Ubisoft doesn't need to keep searching for increasingly bigger maps or completely reinvented AC every few years. Maybe their best ideas have been sitting right in front of them this entire time. So let me ask you a question. If Ubisoft announced tomorrow they were turning one of these forgotten Helix memories into a full AAA Assassin's Creed game, which one are you choosing? The Bladed Cross, Jazz's Junkies, or Hibernia? Because personally, I think Ubisoft could make an incredible AC game out of all 3.